to the NXT Podcast, your home for weekly NXT reviews and insight.
The beautiful part of NXT is that when one dream ends, another dream begins.
Find all of your NXT news, recaps, and analysis right here. So with that being said, we only have one question for you.
Are you ready?
We thought so. Let's get the show started right now.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the NXT Podcast. My name is Zachary Smith. I am once again your host here today. I want to thank you so much again for joining me here. As I said on the first week and every week since then, this has been nothing short of a dream come true for me. And again, I cannot thank you enough for allowing me to come into your homes through your devices. And a big thank you to you and a big thank you to Matt, the folks here with the WWE Podcast, for giving me the chance to come to you again today. We are very lucky here. We have our second week of NXT that was an actual full show. I feel like we're getting into the swing of things a bit here. And we're going to go over all of that and really set everything up for you heading into WrestleMania weekend, as well as the takeover that was going to happen, which is now going to just be dispersed amongst NXT shows. That's going to be our main event tonight with Keith Lee, Dominik Dijakovic, and Damian Priest for the North American title. So, as far as wrestling news goes, we're going to talk about WrestleMania, and we're going to talk about some of the builds for WrestleMania. And what we're going to talk about is, I feel like a lot of the builds for the WrestleMania matches have been very good, despite everything that's been going on and obviously everything that's going to be a problem going into that show, namely no fans. So for a lot of programs, say Drew McIntyre and Brock Lesnar for the WWE title, that has a great build so far. That started with Drew eliminating Brock Lesnar at the Royal Rumble, really setting up that match, and at just about every turn, Drew has gotten the better of Brock. It really helps set up Drew as that next guy up and makes him feel like a big deal, and uses Brock Lesnar for exactly what I think you want to use Brock Lesnar for. This kind of started when he broke the Undertaker's WrestleMania streak, and when he did that, he became even more intimidating and even more over as a character than he was before. And if you're going to do that with somebody, you're doing it, number one, to have a huge megastar, but number two, you're using that megastardom to propel somebody. And we've seen it a few times with Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns, where for one reason or another, it didn't work out in the long run. But it does very much feel like with Drew McIntyre here, we have something that is very special, and it really is helping to make a guy, because if you can come across well in that match and beat Brock Lesnar, there's no fluke to that. That's a big deal. Anytime Brock Lesnar loses, it's a big deal because it doesn't happen often, nor should it. You even have builds like on this show, we have a couple of minutes on Rhea Ripley and Charlotte Flair. Rhea's putting up her NXT Women's title against Charlotte Flair. That one's also a great build. You have somebody kind of stepping out of the shadow of Charlotte Flair, and Charlotte Flair wants all of the gold and is coming back to NXT where she started. That's a great build as well. You have somewhat funnier storylines where you have Daniel Bryan and Drew Gulak, who have become, after a match, training partners. And Drew Gulak is Daniel Bryan's teacher. It almost feels like when The Miz was Daniel Bryan's pro in NXT, where you know Daniel Bryan doesn't actually need the lessons, but they've become quite the partnership and setting up an Intercontinental title match with Sami Zayn at WrestleMania. You have, obviously, probably the most exciting match going into WrestleMania, Edge and Randy Orton. Obviously, you have Edge coming back after 9 long years, and in order to really set that feud off and make it something personal, you're going to have to do something like you did with Randy Orton attacking him, attacking Beth Phoenix. It's a big deal. It feels important. It was obviously going to feel important when Edge came back no matter what, but putting him in there with Randy Orton, you have playing off of the Rated RKO tag team that they were, and you have a deep personal issue where you want to see Edge back in a serious match, just a one-on-one match, but you also want to see Edge just beat the hell out of Randy Orton. That's by far the most interesting feud going into WrestleMania. John Cena and The Fiend. You're very interested to see that match and what they're going to do with it. The Fiend is my favorite character that I've seen in I can't tell you how long in wrestling. And we had that hiccup with Goldberg, but we're moving on. And that's going to be visually very interesting. And I hope a very good win for The Fiend. I say all that to say, we do have a couple builds that aren't quite going well, I would say. Obviously, you have Goldberg as your Universal Champion, and obviously when Matt and I discussed The Fiend versus Goldberg, we didn't see any way that Goldberg was going to walk out with the Universal title, although I think we made a one-off joke that WWE may very well wake up and decide they want Goldberg to be their champion. Lo and behold, that's what we got. And we set up a spear versus spear match of Goldberg versus Roman Reigns, and we have a little bit of setup, and then we get the news, of course, right after I record the podcast talking about it last week, that Roman Reigns made the decision that he's going to step down from that match. Now, obviously, with his leukemia diagnosis, he's immunocompromised, and so that's not a great idea necessarily to jump into a ring and compete, and he made that video saying that he was doing this for his health and was thinking of his family, and so he has to drop out of the match. I completely understand that from his perspective. That's the first thing that you should be thinking of is your health and your family. I also understand fans' frustration with that decision because he's been on the shows up till now. He's reportedly still going to be at the show, just not wrestling, and it just feels like inconvenient timing that we're now on the last week before WrestleMania and you've now decided to drop out, meaning that we have to find somebody at the last minute. So I do understand those frustrations as well. It sounds like we may be getting Braun Strowman in that spot, as he doesn't really have anything to do at WrestleMania. So it'll certainly be interesting to see what they do there. Obviously, every time Braun Strowman has gone for the title, it's not gone well for him. The Intercontinental title is the only singles title he's won. You'll remember the other title was the tag team titles that he won with an 11-year-old. It was Nicholas. He was the son of the referee in that match. So maybe this is a chance for Braun Strowman to finally reach that peak. I mean, it's a couple of years too late, but it's still something you could do. And then we have the Undertaker and AJ Styles, which felt dead in the water to me as soon as it started. I've never been a big fan of really a lot of what Triple H has done in some of his WrestleMania matches where he quote-unquote breaks the fourth wall or breaks kayfabe. He'll call people by their real names and talk about real animosity between them. And to a degree, that can work, but when you have AJ Styles calling him Mark Calloway and mentioning Michelle McCool and humanizing him, and then this week on Raw, The Undertaker calling AJ Styles Alan Jones and saying that you waited until The Undertaker and Stone Cold and The Rock and John Cena and so on and so forth had moved past before you came in. It just feels like you're stepping away from the characters and you're now talking about the two real men. And for me, that's something that I feel like WWE has done so much of that it really doesn't affect me anymore. And really just feels like you're trying to make something where there isn't anything. by making it more personal, or trying to, by calling people their real names. Could just be me, but as I've said the last couple weeks, I'm excited for this WrestleMania. I'm excited to see what they do with it. They did a couple things on the NXT show visually that made me think that they're testing different things out, and I'm excited to see what we get. It's not going to be the WrestleMania that we were hoping for, obviously with fans and with a full arena, but we might get something special out of it just because we have to. But that's enough stalling from me. I am here for you and your NXT review on the NXT podcast. And once again, we are here at the Full Sail Arena. Obviously, it is empty. And we have Tom Phillips and Sam Roberts joins on commentary. And I do have to say, just before I start, I like Sam Roberts on his podcast and his Sirius XM show with Jim Norton. He's very good there, and I enjoy a lot of his work. I say that to say I did not enjoy his work here today. It just didn't click for me at any point. I found him distracting. It seems as though he was tasked with being something of a heel announcer, and that just wasn't working for me. I found myself tuning out the commentary during the entirety of this show. I don't know, maybe you feel the same. Let me know. I could be tripping there, but I just wasn't feeling it. So we're starting hot. We're starting with the Velveteen Dream, and he's making his entrance for his match with Bobby Fish. We heard last week that he's going to have to basically go through the members of the Undisputed Era if he wants to get to Adam Cole. And we speculated that he was going to have to go through everybody, and here we are. So he's coming out for his entrance, and he has normal tights on. I thought at first that they were going to be toning down some of those heel tendencies that he's had, because it seems like a very babyface storyline that we're presenting. And he makes his entrance. Very cool entrance the Velveteen Dream has. It's very unique. It's not like anything that's going on in wrestling. And Bobby Fish is out next with the Undisputed Era's music. This does definitely feel like the beginning of a takeover feud. Not between these two, but it definitely feels like a takeover storyline that's going into it. And it should, which is good. And I was thinking as they were sizing each other up that Velveteen is a great NXT character. And at some point he's going to get called up to the main roster. That's inevitable. But I do worry about him on the main roster from a character perspective. I think I was on a podcast or talking to a friend about him, and I said my concern is that he's excellent and he could be a top star for WWE. He can talk, he can wrestle, he looks the part, but his character makes me think that on the main roster they're going to treat him like Goldust if they took Goldust less seriously. That's obviously our worst case scenario for somebody going up to the main roster. And it's a bit concerning to me. Velveteen Dream obviously has the talent in all aspects to be a top star on the main roster, either Raw or SmackDown, but I just hope that he gets that chance. And as a longtime NXT fan, I'm very familiar with people getting called up and then they don't have the success that they should have. And I think that the Dream is more than talented enough to capitalize on that, but we'll have to see. We have to go through this story before we even worry about that. And as we go through some of this match, I do find myself worrying because Bobby Fish has had a couple of injuries now during tag matches in NXT. So now whenever I watch him take a bump or I watch a spot that looks particularly bad, I find myself worried about him, which can kind of take you out of a match. And it's interesting because we talked about how this is very much a babyface storyline, and the Velveteen Dream is a very cocky character. That's at the core of who he is, but he almost felt too cocky in this match. He did the hip gyration a lot in this match, and was going to drop an elbow from the top rope and started doing it again and didn't realize Bobby Fish had rolled out of the ring. He seemed almost too cocky in this match. It just felt like too much, and he was getting distracted by it. And obviously, it's a short match, and he hits the Dream Valley Driver and pins Bobby Fish. So one member of the Undisputed Era down, and he's one step closer to Adam Cole and that NXT title. And then Dream cuts a short promo. It was a weird promo, a lot of innuendo, just basically saying that Adam Cole's time is coming. And it feels like the right choice that the Dream is going to be challenging for the title, presumably. But it also feels like a lot of his momentum has stopped or slowed since his injury. And it's odd because usually you'll see momentum, you'll see a large spike of reaction when somebody first comes back like you saw. But it feels like if we had done this maybe a year ago, this would have felt bigger than it does. And I think that if we do get to the point where he takes the NXT title, I think it will still be a big moment. I just don't feel like it's going to feel like as big of a moment. And I don't know why. It's odd. But we have a lot of time to tell this story. And so hopefully by the time we get there, we have more to work with and you start getting more from Dream and more from Adam Cole, and we can work from there. And obviously they'll have a fantastic match if it gets to that point, so I'm not too worried about it. We cut backstage to Malcolm Bivens and his new tag team being interviewed, and he's basically calling out the other tag teams, and Malcolm Bivens appears to be a very good promo from these last couple weeks. He's only talked a little bit, but he does seem to be very good. I wonder why they haven't used him before now. He's been on the bump. He's been a character on WWE shows, but not in terms of a wrestling character. And I'm not sure why. Maybe they were just waiting for the right team, and they interview for just a second both members of the team, and it feels a lot like the Authors of Pain, where you have one guy who's the manager and then two guys who speak in a different language and are just intimidating and stand behind him in suits. Just, I got a very Authors of Pain vibe from how they dress and how they talk, and so I'm not seeing anything with them yet, but I'm hopeful that we'll see more as the weeks go on. Maybe it's a slow burn situation where, we didn't really have time to go into it this week. Maybe next week we'll find out more. Malcolm calls them, I believe it was Bivens Enterprises, so they still don't have a tag team name. That's weird, I feel like. And it's a short promo from them, and then we get another promo package, just like last week. Looks like something that Sting would have had when he first debuted. Realized that it's probably Killer Cross. Don't know why I couldn't figure that out last week. I couldn't. I'll remind you, I'm dumb. That might be why. And so, yeah, Killer Cross. And we basically still get the countdown clock. And Tom Phillips, I wasn't tuning him out because he's very good, was talking about that clock counting down to what, though? And that's interesting because we don't know what he'll be doing when he first gets here. We also don't know when he's going to be debuting. So that'll be fun to kind of see what we have to work with when he comes in and infuses some more talent, hopefully towards the top of that, class of wrestlers that we have right now in NXT. Presumably, if Adam Cole were to lose the title, he would be moving to Raw or SmackDown. I don't know what would be left for him to do, so if you can add somebody else into that, that would help a lot. And so we go from that to replaying Ciampa and Gargano fighting in the Performance Center, which was about 3 weeks ago now. And it was a very fun and very unique backstage brawl. They are attacking each other with weights, and Ciampa tosses the weight at the mirror and smashes it. There's a lot of cool little details in that fight that kind of set it apart. And it shows them all the way to brawling outside and standing on that podium where Ciampa eventually drops down with Gargano. And it just really helped set the stakes again for us in this match. What didn't help as much is that the graphic says that it's Blackheart versus Rebel Heart, one last beat, which is a super weird way to promote that match. It was a very serious looking graphic, and I giggled when I saw it, because that's just, it's weird, and you didn't call them that before. Ciampa Blackheart, yes, but the one last beat made me laugh, which I don't think is what they were going for. But next up, we do have our 6-woman gauntlet match to get the last spot in the NXT Women's number 1 contender ladder match. So we have Shotzi Blackheart out first. And Shotzi is a very unique character. She has a different look and a different in-ring presence than some of the women in NXT. I don't know if they had plans for her originally, or she was just going to be a one-off, but she's become a lot more interesting as time has gone by, and I think we might have something going forward with her. And then on the opposite side of that, we have the virtuosa, Deonna Purrazzo. And it doesn't feel like she's a real person yet, and I don't know what she's the virtuoso of. So, that's the kind of thing where I think they thought of a cool name and didn't really have anything past that. And they reiterate to us that the last woman standing, either by pinfall or submission, gets added to that ladder match. Tom Phillips informs me that Deonna is apparently the virtuosa of the Fujiwara armbar. So I'm glad that we cleared that up. I take it back. I was wrong. She's a virtuosa. They have a very short exchange, and then Shotzi wins with basically a senton from the top rope and gets the 1, 2, 3. And very quickly we get Xia Li out next. It's at this point I realize that we might be going for Shotzi lasting a long time to get over a bit more. I don't look ahead in spoilers, so at this point I was sure Dakota Kai was going to win, but figured we can give some shine to Shotzi while we're doing this match. And so, as they go, gauntlet matches are kind of a perfect way to get somebody over, as long as you don't overdo it. So when you had Kofi Kingston do it, you get to see somebody struggle against different wrestlers and have to go through hell to earn whatever the opportunity is. For Kofi, it was a WWE Championship. For, in this case, Shotzi Blackheart, she's trying to earn her way into this ladder match. The only problem is that this match didn't get a lot of time, and so the exchanges were very fast. Just in the time it's taken me to talk to you, she had already beaten Deonna Purrazzo, and it just doesn't give you a lot of time to sympathize with the babyface that's having to go through all these competitors. So I feel like we did get some shine on Shotzi so far, but it's not translating just because I feel like this match was a bit rushed or maybe cut a bit for time. And so Shotzi beats Xia Li via a submission that I've never seen before, and I'm sure I can't describe accurately, but Xia Li was sitting on the mat, and Shotzi comes from behind her and grabs her arms basically behind her in an underhook, and then flips over her, so she's basically bearing all of her weight down, and gets Xia Li to tap. I mean, I'm sure it's happened before, but I've never seen that. I don't know what it would be called, and I'm sure I did a poor job of explaining it. So definitely check it out. It's a unique submission. Looked very cool. Wasn't expecting it. And so we have Aaliyah out next. So again, this match is going by very, very quickly. Just in the time I'm talking about it, these eliminations are happening. And just like that, Aaliyah taps to that same weird submission. I like it, but it's weird. And then boom, next, Caden Carter. And, this was a second chance gauntlet match, so you were going to have a little bit of this. But you do have a few people here, Caden Cross, Aaliyah, Deonna Purrazzo, that don't feel like they have a legitimate chance to win. And so it almost feels like you're kind of just waiting for the inevitable. But, still impressive by Shotzi to go through all of these people. And so Caden Carter, again, very short exchange, top rope senton, Shotzi eliminates Caden Carter. And so last but not least, we have Dakota Kai coming out with Raquel Gonzalez, her muscle. And at this point, I figured, all right, it's been good having you, Shotzi. It's an impressive performance. Dakota Kai as a heel is definitely more interesting than she was as a babyface, but I don't think it's quite hit her stride as a character outside of feuding with Tegan. So at the War Games, when she turned on Tegan, and that felt like a big deal, and it was a big, big moment and got a great reaction from the crowd. But for some reason, it doesn't feel like, even when there were fans, that they connected exceptionally with her as a heel. It felt more like people were apathetic rather than hated her, which is the worst thing you can get as a heel, is people not caring one way or the other. And I feel like that's what we have with Dakota Kai right now, where I feel like she's doing very good work, but it's just not quite clicking outside of when she's with Tegan Nox, because you have that story built in. So, with distraction help from Raquel, Dakota hits the go-to kick. Yeah, I say go-to kick, which is just a worse version of a go-to-sleep. Kicks her with the leg that's closer rather than further away, and it didn't look like it hurt. And Dakota moves on to the ladder match. So, we got Shotzi over as much as we could with the short match, and hopefully Dakota gets some heel heat going into it. I mean, it was so short that Shotzi didn't even really seem that tired. She seemed tired, but not, so bad off that it was inconceivable she could win. So I don't know how much heat Dakota got off of it, but I think Dakota is very interesting to have in this ladder match. And I imagine that her and Tegan will take each other out of that match, and we'll be able to continue their story there. So that'll be good. And then we have a video package for Charlotte Flair and Rhea Ripley. And it starts as just a Charlotte Flair video package, shows a couple of her highlights, and it shows that she's on Raw, I believe, and is saying that she can challenge for any championship that she wants. And she's interrupted by Rhea Ripley. And Rhea basically says, if you can challenge for any title, why don't you take a shot at mine, the NXT Women's title? And then it's a little bit of an interview of Rhea Ripley talking about when she first got to NXT. And it shows clips of her. And she looks so different. I forgot that that's what she looked like when she first got there. She speaks to it in a second, but she looked a bit like Charlotte Flair. Maria says that when she first got to NXT, she was compared with Charlotte Flair, and everybody said, oh, you're just like a mini Charlotte. And just from an aesthetics perspective, that comparison works. And then Rhea says that she's done everything she can to make sure that she is not compared to Charlotte Flair. And this is interesting because it sets the stakes very well for this title match. Charlotte Flair wants to challenge for the NXT title because NXT is the house that she feels like she built with respect to Paige. And Rhea Ripley not only is fighting for her NXT title, but she's fighting to kind of get out of the shadow of Charlotte Flair. Number one, because she was called Mini Charlotte when she first got to NXT. But number two, because if you're a women's champion in WWE, comparisons to Charlotte Flair are going to come from that. And, Bayley and, all of the champions that have been on any of the shows, not only just right now with Bayley and Becky, have had to cross paths with Charlotte. So I think it's interesting that you have this match and they made it feel like a big deal and not a step down for Charlotte. And you also free up Bayley and Becky to do their own thing, because those are matches we've seen and we don't necessarily want to see again. And so we have a situation where we kind of move Charlotte Flair out of the way for the time being, and we get her in a big match. Now, that being said, Rhea should absolutely win this match. Obviously, Rhea should retain the title. That'll do a lot for Rhea Ripley. It'll get her first WrestleMania match. It'll be a big match at WrestleMania, not just a battle royal or something. And it'll be a huge opponent for her to hopefully beat and kind of work from there. And then we can set up Rhea with whoever wins this ladder match, and then Charlotte can go on to do whatever it is that Charlotte's going to do. And so we get another video package for Ciampa and Gargano. This is from when Ciampa first turned on Gargano 3 years ago. I mentioned this in the episode a couple weeks ago when it was just a clip show of Ciampa and Gargano, but it's crazy to me that that was 3 years ago. This feud feels like it's been very long, and it has, but it doesn't feel that long. It doesn't feel like 3 years. And it was just striking that the graphic comes up 3 years ago, and you realize that this story's been going on off and on for that long. It's been since 2017. And we're setting up that empty arena match is going to be next week. Goes without saying, that's going to be a phenomenal match, and we replay Triple H again saying, you do what you got to do, but when this is over, it's over. And it's really setting up that one way or the other, this is going to be the end of it. And they've had fantastic matches when it was still just a part of the feud. So with a blow off and basically they're getting their own kind of arena space to work with, I can only imagine what those two are going to come up with for that. And it's going to be a fantastic blow off match. It's been probably the best rivalry in the history of NXT. I think that goes without saying. And I think their blow-off match is going to be equally incredible. And they're finally getting the chance to finish their story together, which they've wanted to do in the past, and injuries have stopped them. But now here we are. Hopefully everything goes according to plan. And that match is going to be next week. So I'll have a lot of fun going over that with you guys as well. And so we go from that to the triple threat match. We have Damian Priest, Dominik Dijakovic, and Keith Lee for Keith Lee's NXT North American title. This is absolutely a takeover match. Could have been a takeover main event match. You notice that a lot of what I do here is going over kind of broad strokes, and I don't generally go into individual moves in a match. I usually just set it up for you, tell you how it ended. And a lot of that is because my favorite part of wrestling is the wrestling. I also love the entertainment aspect. I love the promos, but I feel like obviously at the heart of wrestling is what happens in between the bell. And I want you to experience that for yourself. So for example, with the Gauntlet match, if you were to skip over that, you're not missing a ton just because it was rushed, it felt like. Now, that is not the case with this triple threat match. This triple threat match was fantastic to watch. You have Dominik Dijakovic hitting moonsaults. You have Keith Lee attacking Dominik Dijakovic with Damian Priest. He picked him up, he used him like a club, hit Dijakovic, and then powerbombed Dijakovic with Priest like 3 or 4 times. You have Damian Priest toward the end going for that nightstick. Dijakovic dispatching Priest, and then Keith Lee pounces Damian Priest out of the ring. That pounce is still awesome. I don't care how many times he does it. I'm going to love it every time. And is able to put Dijakovic down 1, 2, 3, and Keith Lee is still your NXT North American champion. Interesting, when they were setting up the match and introducing the competitors, they showed a graphic. They showed the video of them, and then it was a tail of the tape, basically. And it had their height, their weight, their reach, and their style. So Keith Lee's was like power, agility, and speed. And that was interesting because I had never seen that before in NXT. That's what we were talking about earlier with graphically setting things up differently than they had before. I had never seen that. It made it feel like a big fight as opposed to just a title match. It felt like a big deal because this is something new, and it feels like you're setting up a fight as opposed to a wrestling match when you start talking about reach and styles, and they did a good job of showing off each guy in this match. So, obviously at this point you're not sure what each guy is going to do next. I am glad that Keith Lee kept the North American title. As far as Damian Priest and Dijakovic go, presumably they'll go off now and do their own thing as they've now had their chance at the title. I don't really want to see them keep running that back. It was a fantastic match, but all things considered, you don't want to see the same guys in the same matches all the time. But with all three of these guys, you have excellent workers. They can all talk, and I want to see them in different feuds now and kind of work their way up. So whether we have Killer Cross come after one of them or we have them face each other, I don't know what we're doing from here, but I know that if you can watch one thing from wrestling this week, it needs to be this NXT North American title triple threat match, because they put it all out there. You would have sworn if you just watched the match that it was a takeover, because they did a great job of feeding off the crowd that was not there and put it all on the line. You have to remember they're putting it all on the line with no fans. You can hear a pin drop in there. So again, go back, watch this match yourself. My dulcet tones can carry you through what happened, but I can't accurately recreate this match for you. You're going to have to see it for yourself. So, we end with a shot of Keith Lee holding up that North American title. And we know that next week, we're definitely going to have Ciampa and Gargano settling their feud. And so we have a few things to look forward to. Not only that, we have the 6-women ladder match to determine the number 1 contender. Presumably we'll have more about Rhea and Charlotte. And we may get to see, I don't know if we'll see Killer Cross yet or if we'll just see more promo material. And we'll get to see kind of where everybody's going. I'm assuming that Velveteen Dream's going to have to take on, I would assume, Kyle O'Reilly now. And to get to Adam Cole and setting up that match for later if we're not already doing it. And we have a lot of good stuff to look forward to here. I'm very glad, needless to say, that we're back to full matches on NXT. Obviously, it's been an adjustment period for all of us, but we're here and now we're getting really, really good wrestling. And I feel like NXT lends itself very well to not having a crowd. I feel like NXT has been the quickest to adjust. Really, it's been AEW, but as far as WWE goes anyway, it's been the fastest to adjust and feels the least awkward of Raw, SmackDown, NXT in terms of not having a crowd and how they're working around that. So I'm excited, obviously, to see Ciampa Gargano, and I'm excited to see every week there's been a few things different in terms of the presentation as we head to WrestleMania and as we head to really an indefinite amount of time where people aren't going to be able to see the show live in the building. And obviously this is a very scary time for all of us, but as far as wrestling fans, I said it last week, this has been a fantastic community to get together and just enjoy this entertainment and just rolling with the punches and taking it as it goes, and really that's all we can do. So I hope that you got a lot out of this NXT this week. I know I did. I know it was great to escape for an hour, and I hope that it's great to escape with me for about 40 minutes or so each week here. I say that to say, I have been your host, Zachary Smith, and I'm going to be joining you again next week. Again, if you want to reach me, you have questions, comments, concerns, if you want to hear something talked about on the show, if you just have a question you want to talk about on the show, or on Twitter, I am at ZachNXT, that's ZACHNXT. I'll respond to you, and if it's something that we want to talk about on the show, we'll talk about it on the show. We here at the WWE Podcast love hearing from you, and I think I can speak for my coworkers here when I say thank you so much. We know that you have a lot of entertainment options to go with here, and I personally can't thank you enough for picking me. I've been Zachary Smith. I will talk to you next week.